podcast starts.
Listeners, welcome. If this is your first time listening to the show, and if you've heard us before, welcome back, and thanks for sticking with us. This show talks about horror in film, TV, other media, other items which we think of as adjacent to horror, and sometimes other things from our lives which we'd like to talk about just because that's who we are. Our discussions aim to be fun, intelligent, and hopefully useful if you're interested in horror texts, comes from a creative or academic perspective. But be warned, we do tend to swear occasionally, and if it's anything less offensive than the C word, it won't get bleeped. So, if you are still able to go into your place of work, we may not be safe for it. In this episode, we're going to be talking about something timely that hopefully soon won't be as timely. We're going to be talking about pandemic-focused horror, specifically the 1970s British television series Survivors, and Steven Soderbergh's American film from 2011, Contagion. I am TD Velasquez. As always, you can call me Dan. I'm in Greater Manchester, and I have the great pleasure of being joined by two colleagues. Firstly, Stella. Hello.
Hello. Hello. Hello. Don't know why I said it like that. Hello.
It's all cool. You're very welcome.
I think he was watching the 1970s Survivors because everyone was talking like that in that sort of received pronunciation, so it's sunk in a little bit. I'll make it go away.
That's true. That's very true. It does. I think I might actually watch. I need to watch even more of it because I need to stop mumbling. Stella's in Greater Manchester. Well, for me, Stella, the weather's been very nice today. I hope it has for you.
Yeah, man. And my daughter came home from school and demanded an ice lolly, so...
Wow.
You know, right. That definitely tells us that the season is changing, because she's burst through the door and demands cold things immediately.
And we are also joined by Ian. Hello, Ian.
Hello. I've got a cat on me, as you can see, but the listeners can't. Leave me alone. So, listeners, if you can either hear me scream, it's because he's dug his claws in like he does, or... if you can hear him purring, that's not me purring. That's wish I could purr. Ow! Right, I'm gonna...
Oh dear! It all went wrong. How's the weather been in Cheshire, Ian? Just for our regular update.
I refuse to talk about the weather, but it's been very sunny, and it was nice. And I've been sat in front of a computer all day, which has been even nicer.
Wow!
I've been really enjoying having kids at school and having, my God, when you
it's great, isn't it?
If you're a writer and you ever get sick of your job, homeschool some children and have to write at 6 a.m. before they wake up, and then suddenly be given acres and acres of an open day and writing. I don't think I've ever written quite so much. First drafts have been great and everything's going really well.
Oh, fantastic!
I'm sure it won't last.
It's an eye-opener, isn't it?
It is.
Definitely.
I can't imagine how you guys have coped with it, really.
Well, people have had a lot, I've had to type on a computer when I've found the time. Other people have had to, go and do proper jobs.
But
where you can catch COVID-19 quite easily.
Well, yeah.
So,
I've been able to work from home and continue doing my job, and my kid is old enough to just kind of get on with her own home learning, really. Mm-hmm. So, when she was at home, she's gone back now, she had timetabled lessons and she just got on with it. So I do fully appreciate that I have had it easier than most.
But
she's back at school now. Hey!
It is weird considering what we're talking about program-wise, because one of the things about all these disaster movies and real-life disasters like COVID-19 is who you are and what your personal circumstances are when the asteroid hits, so to speak, when the thing happens, when when the atom bomb drops, what you're doing in that period of time is like a snapshot, and you've got to deal with it. And it's don't be old when the end of the world comes. Don't be a little kid.
Well, it makes us count our blessings, if nothing else.
It does. No. I mean, I've been saying, this is a COVID-19 thing. I've been saying since the beginning, imagine if this was actually a bad plague. I know it's pretty bad, but imagine if it was
the plague.
Even if it, but imagine even if it was just SARS or something that had got out. that killed a lot of people where it was about to spread. And imagine if it killed children. It doesn't kill children. So, there's many blessings even within COVID-19.
Yeah.
But anyway, and as Contagion and Survivor show us, it could easily have dealt us this blow unprepared.
Yeah.
And nobody was prepared except people that already had SARS. And so you could see COVID-19 as the biggest blessing ever because it's been a shot across the bows.
Definitely.
Say for the 2 million people that have lost their lives, but yeah.
I've been saying from the start that as horror fans, we are kind of forearmed against this kind of stuff because we know it could be a lot worse. But at the same time, that's also why I've kind of tried to avoid specific kind of post-apocalyptic plague type horror because I didn't really feel in the mood for it in recent times. But I forced myself to look at these because I wanted to see if I'd still enjoy them. Anyway, we'll get onto that in our main discussion. Stella, I believe you have some news you'd like to talk about.
I do. So I wrote a chapter for an edited collection. The collection's called Global TV Horror. And it's edited by Stacey Abbott and Lorna Jowett, and they're like some of the best academics in the world when it comes to horror and specifically TV horror. And I've written a chapter in it about the global spread of The Walking Dead, incidentally enough. And it's coming out this month. So it will be available by the end of the month, and I suspect but it's going to be in hardback, so it'll be ruinously expensive, so it's probably only for colleges and universities to cough up for. But that'll be out this month, so that's well exciting.
You're going to have an electronic form that we can access via academic websites.
Yes. It'll be an ebook
and things like that. I can read it then.
Yeah, you can read it. But I'll get a copy, hopefully sent to me soon. But I'll insist that our university gets a hard copy in as well, so that every time I'm in the library I can point to it.
Nice.
But yeah, so that's very exciting. I think I wrote it about 2.5 years ago.
What we used to do when I was a student, we used to sort of whisper and go, "He's in here again," seeing if anyone's checked his book out.
Well, I'll be able to see that online now, though, won't I?
And we kind of deliberately didn't.
Well, you know what?
I've read a book,
It's here.
When I was at uni, one of the units I studied was Hammer, obviously being who I am, and our tutor, Jerry Kubro, I've paid tribute to him on this podcast before, or in one of the episodes that I did with Howard, because, he did teach us a lot, but he had written a little book about horror in about 1980, and there was a hardback copy of it in the library, and I never read it, and I don't know if anybody did, and I don't know if it was available anywhere else. And poor Jerry, he's passed on now, and he's not only has he passed on, but the actual university library, which was at Sheffield Hallam, has been demolished. So I don't even know if anybody would have rescued that book, or if there was any other copies.
Well,
you
feel sad for that book.
You should definitely go and find out. As soon as
get one.
Ordered this, get Googling.
Yeah, I've never tried to Google him actually. Yeah, Jerry Kubro. He was lovely.
We should have a look.
Yeah.
Some horror books, like my friend Tony Earnshaw, who wrote. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he wrote like the definitive account of the Night of the Demon.
All right.
And his book goes for like 400 quid.
Wow.
On eBay and things because everyone who's got one and wants one, everyone who bought one hasn't given it up. So they're not printing anymore. So literally the ones that are out there are, to a certain niche audience, because it's a very good book. Worth 400 quid.
Yeah, in fact, when I've tried to find books that have not been in our library, I was like, okay, well, I'll just buy a copy myself. And if a book's under 20 quid, then I'll get it. 'Cause it's quite like having books. But then sometimes, I'll go on eBay or Amazon to find an academic book. And then, it's like 100, 150 quid and up. But it's fucking hell. No, I'm not buying that. That's just, they're just not getting cited then, are they? Can't do it.
No.
Oh, dear.
It's madness.
Oh, no.
I always think if there are... if there's not an electronic version I can access via the internet, by the academic websites, and they're
The
not
portals.
websites. Yeah. But anyway.
Well, this one will, and mine will when it's finished.
Yes.
And well done, Stella.
When I go back to teaching students, I'll make sure we always talk about The Walking Dead. It's a great sort of leveler for getting nearly every single 18-year-old has watched it.
Yeah.
And if they haven't, then I always start with analysing the opening pre-credit bit, because it's an amazing, it's an amazing setup for a massive, so all the questions you can ask about writing drama are in those,
At the gas station.
Rick Grimes shooting a girl is basically all of drama.
It's great, but
It's
there's
amazing.
a big, massive problem in it, and every time I watch it, it makes me grind
Really,
my teeth.
I must have watched it with my students about 1,000 times.
Okay.
There's, but
the
I
little
haven't
girl
noticed
zombie.
the problem.
The little girl zombie picks up a teddy.
That's a major plot point.
Yeah, but the zombies don't pick up tools or anything. They have no memory of their past. We go through this in season
that's
3.
the whole thing. Is they kind of do.
No, those creatures don't pick shit up. They don't.
No, they
Well,
So the fact that this little girl
later
wonders,
in the series,
she
they
picks
never
up a
do, do
teddy.
they?
No. Well, it's maybe problematic, but in terms of analysing it as a piece, that is the midpoint. In terms of structure, it messes with it's genius because it messes with every single person watching it. Because if you're a zombie fan and you know it's called The Walking Dead, you go, oh, zombies. And then she picks Teddy up and you go, oh, she's not a zombie. They've messed with her. Oh, my God, she's a zombie. And if you're not...
But the zombie wouldn't pick a teddy up.
But she does, because she's little and she's obviously only just turned. So it's terrifying.
No.
It works because they're the undead. They're the undead.
Yeah, so she doesn't need a teddy.
Just
Dead.
like in Romero. It's a Romero world, isn't it? Just like
No, Romero doesn't exist in this world. The word zombie doesn't exist.
No, but as in
It's the rules of Romero.
As in, it's the George A. Romero type apocalypse. They're not fast zombies. They're George A. Romero zombies. And as his famously do, they go, what did we do in life? We went shopping. What should we do when we're dead? We'll go shopping. So they do have residual. Also, it's I have no problem with it whatsoever, because
No, it drives me potty.
It's an amazing. If she didn't do that, if she didn't pick the teddy bear up, it wouldn't work anywhere near as much.
She's wearing bunny slippers. That's enough.
Because you were watching it and you went, oh, she's not a zombie, and it went, ha, I got you.
I didn't. I went, why is she picking up a teddy?
Because she's only just turned, and then Rick Grimes proves he's the man for this world because he's a cop, and he wants to help little girl, but then he doesn't really hesitate at all and shoots.
He looks a bit sad, doesn't he?
He's got the perfect Venn diagram of how to survive a zombie apocalypse. He's caring. He cares about other people. Will shoot a little girl in the head if he needs to.
It's what I want in a man.
And that's basically that's why Rick Grimes is the man to follow. Through Walking Dead, and that's basically the first hour of me teaching screenwriting.
Wow. Well, you've both made me want to go back and rewatch that sequence.
About why that fight? No one's ever gone zombies. Actually, I think you're fine. Don't pick up teddy bears.
I have.
I didn't know.
I've got a PhD. Right.
You can't argue with Stella on The Walking Dead.
I think you're fine. Goblins, don't do that. Unless they're in Lord of the Rings, that's not canon. I'm sorry. And zombies don't pick up teddy bears.
But they don't.
But this one did.
Either way, you guys have made me want to watch that again.
Well, all I saw was a zombie picking up a teddy bear. So therefore, even though it's unusual, a bit like Stella.
Yeah.
When we see Morgan's wife, she very much is drawn to the house where her son is.
This is true, but she's still not picking anything up.
It's not the only incidence of residual sort of behaviour.
I'm still not having it.
Zombies. There's one in just the latest one where a guy who appears to have been lazy in life is also a lazy zombie because he doesn't get up. Then when he does get sliced in the head, he sits back down exactly like he's just been.
They just.
and I remember, and this is just literally the latest episode. I remember going, I bet he was a lazy bastard when he was alive. So that residual behaviour is there, and they established it in the first frames of episode 1. Anyway, we've possibly talked about the first 5
10:08.
Well, no, it's we've segued almost imperceptibly into post-apocalyptic horror, so I think it's all appropriate.
Yes,
somehow. And I think we will be bringing The Walking Dead up. So basically, for this episode, the three of us watched the first episode of Survivors from 1975, which is Terror Nation's series about a flu-like virus wiping out 99.9%. I love that number, 99.9% of the world's population. And we also watched the movie Contagion, which is freakishly like the COVID-19
the news
pandemic. Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? Ian and I think both listened to the audio version of Survivors, which was released in 2014. Yeah. Did you get a chance to listen to that, Stella?
I didn't.
Okay, that's all right. No worries. To be honest, it just as we're explaining off mic, the audio version of Survivors and the TV version are basically the same as the Walking Dead relating to Fear the Walking Dead. So you wouldn't necessarily need to have seen the first episode of both those series. But I would like to mention the audio version.
But Fear the Walking Dead. I know this is turning into a Walking Dead podcast. But Fear the Walking Dead. If you watch Fear the Walking Dead first, and you've never watched Walking Dead, that's a wholly different experience.
Mm.
I would argue they wouldn't have opened Fear the Walking Dead in the way they did if we hadn't had 6 or whatever seasons of Walking Dead.
400 years of The Walking Dead.
Sure.
Yeah.
Whereas the audio series of Survivors had to try and appeal to an audience who may not have seen the TV series. So therefore it starts from scratch.
Basically the plague comes, kills everybody, and it starts, because it's yeah.
The dramatic focus of the first episode of the TV series and the first episode of the audio are different characters in different places, and I think they've done a really good job of linking them together in such a way that they both make sense on their own, but if you've seen one of them before, it won't ruin the other one.
And I the word intersect, isn't it? They intersect.
Yeah.
Just like you have to wait till season 4 of Fear the Walking Dead before people from Walking Dead. I mean, they're all spoilers if you say they're going to intersect. Technically, that's a spoiler, isn't it?
Well,
but I guess people can quite easily see the posters of the latest seasons and see who's on it. But
show the cast now, don't they?
Yeah. But that's kind of the appeal of them. It's like they are totally separate in Walking Dead terms, but if they didn't intersect, maybe it would feel a little bit like you really are just milking this now. Well, it feels enough like that as it is.
Although we've continued to talk about The Walking Dead, I haven't seen it, but I like the fact that they at least waited a long time to have those characters meet up in Fear the Walking Dead, because it's like the post-apocalyptic world. It's a big world, and there are a small number of characters. It's not like they just are bound to run into each other.
Yeah,
they may not have done. So it would be,
and quite a few people have survived really in The Walking Dead. So it's a slim chance.
Yeah. So
that one's going to rock up in the other one, but they do.
Also,
it's all right.
They don't know that they're in someone else's TV show.
Yeah.
We're only following them. They don't know that. Why are we so interesting? Oh, it's because that guy over there is trekked here from Atlanta. Oh, it makes sense now.
It's quite a trek, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, Survivors.
Well,
yes.
I thought actually, if we talk about Contagion first, because it's so spooky, in terms of how like the current situation it is.
It was a groundbreaking ceremony for a new factory.
Did you mention seeing anyone who was sick? Anyone on a plane at the airport?
No, she said she was jet lagged.
The average person touches their face 3 to 5 times every waking minute. In between, we're touching doorknobs, water fountains, and each other.
Beth. Mom? No, go up to your room, honey.
So we have a virus with no treatment protocol and no vaccine at this time.
You had a seizure this morning, Beth.
She had a history of seizures,
No.
allergies.
As of last night, there were 32 cases.
Unfortunately, she did die.
Right. And he says, can I go talk to her?
Mr. Armoff, your wife is dead.
What are you talking about?
Okay.
What happened to her? What happened to her?
Is there any way someone could weaponize the bird flu? Is that what we're looking at?
Someone doesn't have to weaponize the bird flu. The birds are doing that.
Watch this. It's transmission, so we just need to know which direction.
On day one, there were 2 people, and then 4, and then 16. In 3 months, it's 1 billion. That's where we're headed.
They're calling out the National Guard. They're moving the president underground. People will panic.
Get away!
It will tip over.
The truth is being kept from the world.
Cook your samples, destroy everything.
Hello. I need you to get me the names of everyone who serviced this room. It's an emergency.
You can't panic now.
I know.
I'm going to get you home. I got people too, Dr. Cheever. We all do.
Don't talk to anyone. Don't touch anyone. Stay away from other people.
Get back in your car. We're not sick.
It's figuring us out faster than we're figuring it out. It's mutated.
Until this podcast, I hadn't watched it, and I think it, whereas you both of you had, I think it raises an interesting question about how do you define horror, because to mention something Kirsty said in an earlier episode, she's not here right now, obviously, she watched it and said it didn't used to be a horror film, but now we're living through it. It kind of is. However, I the reason I'd not watched it is because it looked too frightening, even though I knew it wasn't supposed to be a horror film. The idea of a pandemic being depicted in very realistic terms is terrifying to me, and obviously, just as much now, I think. I mean, how do you both feel about it in terms of?
Well, I watched it when it came out, and liked it, and it had that sort of thrill of, oh, it feels kind of real, but it's almost like, oh, but this is the sort of thing that will never happen.
Yeah.
It was like, it was like, oh, just imagine. And then you could sort of in the pub afterwards go, yeah, people should do something about it. But and you read up on all the stuff. Oh yeah, but it's like, but in your head you go, this will never happen. And it hasn't.
Here we are.
It hasn't happened, as we were saying before. It hasn't happened, but more by luck than by judgment. It's transferred from a bat, jump the species, and it doesn't kill children, and it doesn't kill nearly as many people as the one in the film. The one and the thing is, it could have been. Contagion isn't like an exaggerating, those diseases exist, and by luck we didn't get one.
The point is, we should have known, and obviously a lot of people did know well in advance that this was going to happen. Something like this was going to happen, and we're very lucky that when it did happen, it wasn't a whole lot worse. It's basically like a wake-up call.
I mean, and we should say, in case anyone's listening to this, because I've known people who died from it. Mm-hmm. No one close, thank God. But I've known people, Kelly's lost people at work. People have died, and there are hundreds of thousands of millions of grieving families. So when we're saying we're not making light of it,
no,
it's just, oh my God, we didn't take the threat seriously, and just imagine if we'd got this first.
Yeah.
If we, Contagion. Contagion's it's a really well made film. I mean, I love Soderbergh, and he's well when he goes into, like with Traffic and films like that, when he goes into ensemble networks of people that don't necessarily know each other mode, it's really kind of enjoyable, and he gets loads of famous people in to like do 10 minutes on screen, little vignettes and lots of different stories. It's a really interesting kind of movie. And whether it's the international drug trade or oil in Syriana. In fact, no, Syriana wasn't Soderbergh, was it? But that kind of movie. But Contagion's I really enjoyed it at the time. And then one of the first things I did when COVID-19 came along was everyone started talking about how it was on Netflix.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we all watched it. And the thing is, COVID-19 is, like everyone's called it, the slow apocalypse. And it is kind of like, I've been kind of not scared most of the time, but that's because I've not had to go out, like I was saying. I've been lucky in that I live in rural Cheshire. I've spent my life on a computer before it, and I was on a computer after it. And, my wife's an archaeologist, so she's been going out to work, which is actually quite dangerous compared to, she's safe, but the workmen on the construction site aren't safe.
Right.
Like some of them, not all of them, obviously everyone's different, but some of them are so ridiculously lax and stupid and boast about it. Mm-hmm. And then one guy who was really, really good at not, his whole team would stand them down because the firm were trying to say they didn't need that many COVID tests, and he's the guy who got it and died. So,
right.
But generally I haven't been that scared of it. And every so often I'll panic and I'll go, if I get it, I'm going to die. If I get it, I know I'm going to die. But it was weird watching Contagion because at the time it was still doing the job of a fantasy that was way worse than real life, even though COVID-19 was happening. It still did that thing of, well, it's not like it's going to be like that then. But then as the years gone on, there's lots of stuff in Contagion which is hopelessly optimistic.
Yeah, like how quickly the pandemic passes.
Well, yeah, but they seem to have a functioning government, and they haven't. It was written in a time that no one could really envisage Donald Trump. Donald Trump at the time was in Idiocracy. It was that far removed from real life. Idiocracy, which was a really broad satire. That was as close as we got to Donald Trump at that time.
I don't know Idiocracy.
It's a fantastically broad comedy about a man who wakes up from cryogenic sleep, I think, and he's got quite a low IQ in our time, and he's a genius in America of 500 years. So everyone's IQs have dropped, and a wrestler is the president.
Right.
And you watch it now, and it's like, no, Trump's got in the White House. Idiocracy is here. That was one of the movies everyone sort of cited when 2016 came along. But we still had, when Contagion was made, we still, China are being a bit shady. That bit hasn't aged badly because China was still a bit shady. But the idea that a bunch of Americans would just do what they were told and the response would be fine, and that we didn't. It was made before a time when conspiracy theories had run riot through the internet.
Although it does comment on that.
Yeah, with Jude Law's character.
Yeah.
In some ways, we're living in a scarier time, and thank God, even doubly, we didn't get the disease they got in Contagion, because we're even less prepared for it because our IQs have been shredded by the internet. The general population's gullibility and IQ has plummeted in these past 5 years. Absolutely plummeted.
Oh dear!
But do keep listening.
So do keep listening.
Stella, what did you think rewatching Contagion?
Well, I watched it only about a couple of months into lockdown last year. I think as like when you've got like a sore tooth or something, you can't stop poking at it with your tongue. I think I was just like, I'm going to watch that and make myself feel really miserable.
Right.
So we sat down and we watched it, and it was like, there was two things going on. One, we were both enjoying it 'cause it's a good film. It's it's really well paced. I feel like it rattles along really nicely, and before you know it, you're at the end.
Yeah.
But then I remember we had to keep pausing it. We must have watched it in, I guess, May a time last year. But I remember we kept pausing it to turn to each other and go, "Bloody hell! This is what's happening now?" Or there's that bit where she, I can't remember the actress's name, where she stands up and she talks about the R rate.
Yeah, Kate Winslet.
Yeah, it's Winslet, isn't it? Yeah. And she talks about the R rate, and me and Owen were just sat there going, "What? This is like just what's happening now." And then phrases like they talk about social distancing.
Yep.
They're talking about it's mutating. The conspiracy theory that it's a man-made released virus, and we were just like, this is happening now.
Stay home and wash your hands.
Wash your hands.
It's because it came out of CDC sort of war games and stuff. So all those phrases that we now know so well have existed in guidance and what we would do if.
Yeah, but back in May when when me and Owen watched it, all these phrases were still new to us. We'd only just learned ourselves what the R rate was. We'd only just learned getting used to 2 meters social distancing ourselves.
Remember Kate Winslet released a video when COVID first started.
Oh, right.
No?
She kind of got mocked in some quarters for it, but she said, in 2011, I played this character and I hung out with these people and they are heroes. And if they tell you to do something, you do something. And she started talking about the R rate. And a few people went, "Oh, because you're an actress, we're supposed to take you seriously. Oh, it was a film." And
I'm just a person with some information.
Lots of us went, "Yeah, tell us, Kate, because you're amazing." And and she wasn't being an ass. She was sort of saying, "Take it seriously, because I have played these people, and to play these people, I have walked with them and gone into wards and sat and talked to them. These people
and learnt things.
These people have been to Ebola. They've been to SARS.
Oh, wow.
These are the people that get flown around the world to stop what's happened this 2020, to stop it happening. And when it counted in real life, too many people didn't bloody listen, from politicians down to, the twat I saw in the supermarket shouting at us for being sheep, for wearing masks.
Oh, dear.
Just the other day.
Just recently?
It was like a week ago. Right. And he was strutting, going, "Look at you, sheep, bah." Right. And he obviously was a bit tapped. But at the same time, loads of people don't really want to be doing it. And they still, even now, have that, "Oh, stop moaning." Oh, that's a drug if you vaguely act like it might kill people.
I think what's bugging me at the moment with it all is people, I can't remember whatever day it is that pubs are allowed to open or are allowed, and everyone's like, "Yeah, we're all going to go to the pub and we're all going to go do this and do that." And I'm like, why are you going to get this close? You spent over a year in lockdown. Why are you going to get this close to being vaccinated just to fuck it at the last minute and all start mixing? Like, you can't all just go run into the pub. You can't all go to Reading Festival, for God's sake. Just calm down until everyone's been vaccinated. No, stop it. Just stop it. Or those that can be vaccinated.
I keep saying I don't want to be Wilfred Owen in World War One. He was like killed 4 days from the end. I don't want to
exactly. It's the 2 days before retirement.
Somebody was the last person to get shot in World War One.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be that guy.
Yeah. So it's just. Everyone's like, "Yeah, it's my birthday. We're all going to go to the pub. There's 30 of us."
5 to 11 on Armistice.
Yeah, that is the analogy that I'll use next time, when somebody's going, "Oh, come on, let's come and do that." And I'll go, no. Nice. We'll see how that goes down. But yeah, I'm not getting this close and then just making a balls of it.
I have to say, it makes me feel a little bit uneasy when people are planning holidays and things like that. I mean, yes, do, and we all want them, but at the same time, I think we're planning a holiday for January in our family, tentatively. I think that's kind of reasonable. It's nearly a year away.
People can plan holidays, and now there's the insurance. They might not lose their money, so they can do what they want, but the fact is, they're only dickheads if they go when it's dangerous.
Yeah.
Planning a holiday and hoping for the best. I mean, I remember weirdly, we planned a weekend in Edinburgh, and it seems ridiculous now for like the summer. We just went, we've had to cancel this, we've had to cancel that, but we're allowed to go now, aren't we? So let's book like 2 nights in an Airbnb in Edinburgh, and we'll just take the kids to somewhere different. And then my wife hadn't checked the terms and conditions of that Airbnb person. There were no refunds. She's good like that. So not only did we cancel our summer holiday and lose the money, because it was booked ages ago to Norway. And then just the weekend we tried to book just as a thing. We then lost money on as well. But anyway,
so
we haven't bothered booking anything. But apparently prices have gone through the roof now because everyone's booking. So
I won't be booking anything.
I fully expect us to go back into lockdown, which is why I'm making hay while my son's at school. I'm absolutely going crazy with the rain.
I've got a brother who thinks that there'll be a third wave.
Yes.
I think people have gone mad already. And not, how many people have got the second vaccine in them? Well, the first, let alone the second.
Yeah,
I think, Boris Johnson's done it again. But
wait, should we talk about Survivors?
Yes. I just
something more cheery than Boris Johnson.
Just to finish off on Contagion, though.
Dan, what did you think of Contagion?
I mean, I enjoyed it. I did find it chilling. I mean, because it is a film in which the vast majority of it is people sitting around in rooms having sober conversations, I was like thinking, I can see why this is not a horror film. However, at the end, the main emotion that I carried away was a sense of, a chilling sense of implication. I'm not going to spoil it, but I love the fact that at the end they kind of show you a sequence of exactly where the disease probably came from, and it comes down to...
They give us a God's eye view right at the end, don't they? Because everyone says we'll probably never know where it came from, and then they give us here's a sequence of events of why patient zero what she did to get it.
Yeah, it basically comes down to one person not washing their hands at a key moment.
Yeah, it's basically a government information film now. It was a scary thriller a few years ago. Now it's a government information film.
I did think it was interesting that there's something in the fact that the pandemic in the movie is worse, but that resolved quicker. Like they do actually find the vaccine more quickly than we did in real life. But then the rollout in the movie is worse than the one that we're going through. The rollout of the vaccine, it kind of goes 6 months later, doesn't it? Yeah, and people are still waiting for their jabs and things. So.
Well, we haven't. Let's not get too far ahead. I mean,
well, touch wood.
Even the government is saying by the autumn, the whole of the UK population will be vaccinated.
Yeah,
and that's what they're saying. So I'm budging that on to, are we going to be locked down at Christmas? So, or are we going to have another spike at Christmas because loads of people want to go and do Christmas, even though we're not quite ready yet. So we're not out of the woods.
No, we're certainly not. I'm not hugely optimistic, but I don't want to be pessimistic for that far in the future. I'm hoping that we will have a nice Christmas. There's a long time to go yet, but But I think
I'm hoping I can have a birthday because it's my 40th this year, so I'm hoping that I can see more than my husband. I mean, he's great. But...
I'm 50 next year, and I've had to do a friend's 50th on Zoom, and I was just thinking. Mine's in February next year, my 50th, and I just thought, am I going to have to do mine on Zoom as well?
Well, in 2020, I lost count of the amount of 40th because you got mates all the same age.
Yeah.
There was loads of 40th last year, and Owen's 40th it's the 4th of April, so it was only 2 weeks into lockdown last year. So it was like, okay, and we did many Zoom parties over the year.
I know. Well, I remember when my school friends we were all 40 9 years ago, and we just didn't stop. It was like having a million weddings to go to. We didn't stop travelling up and down the country.
Yeah, that's what we thought was going to happen last year, and then
because and that's what next year is going to be like. Or we're all going to be on Zoom, so we'll because all the birthdays is kicking in. Everyone's going, we're all 49. Fingers crossed for next year.
But fingers crossed for August, though. I want a party, a small one.
going to be great. We're gonna basically just be drunk for a whole year.
Yay!
Traveling around the country, being 50 and not being under COVID-19, hopefully. So we'll see.
I'm 40 in June, and I think it's very optimistic that things will have settled enough for us to do anything. But my sister Ruth is 60 a couple of weeks after I'm 40, so we were planning to do a joint 100th birthday party.
Nice.
Oh, wow.
And we've booked a pub, but I'm not absolutely convinced it will happen. We'll see.
Yeah.
But the problem is, even if it's allowed, is it wise?
Yeah.
Anyway,
don't worry. I'm going to be very prudent on it.
Well, I know you will be.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah. There's going to be other people.
It's everybody else
involved.
Yeah.
So we've only got half an hour or so. So let's move on to survivors.
Yeah.
It is a mutant virus, Jenny, and not yet identified. And with the speed this thing is traveling, we have no way of stopping it.
The city's like a great big pampered baby, with thousands of people feeding it and cleaning it and making sure it's all right.
If the death rate keeps accelerating at this speed, we're not going to be able to bury our dead. There could be cholera, typhoid, and God knows what else.
Anyway, we're all right living in the country.
They're dying, David. And there's nothing I can do to help them.
They'll find something, won't they? They'll find a cure. They're not going to let millions of people die.
In every disease, there are certain people who seem to have a natural immunity.
What you called a stockpile of things will merely give us a little breathing space, perhaps several generations, but in that time, all the old crafts and skills must be learned. We must learn.
The person among us who's not seen it before is Stella. So I want to ask you, Stella, what were your impressions? Basically, by the way, listeners, we're only talking about the first episode of Survivors, because the first episode of Survivors is where the plague happens that wipes people out. The rest of the series is entirely surviving after the plague. So I didn't think it was really relevant in this situation. But I wanted to introduce it to Stella and to other people.
You still see people catch the plague, though, in a future episode, don't you?
You do, because it's just because it kills everybody doesn't mean the disease goes away. It just means there are less
people that go. All those smug people who went and isolated and then they all die because they realise they haven't had it. Oops, we thought everyone had it. Shit. Sorry, you're dead.
Yeah, spoilers, there's an episode where they find a colony of people who are all healthy, but the people don't stay healthy for very long.
They look like a smug folk band, so I was happy that they died.
So anyway.
They're all wearing knitwear and being all smug about growing their own. And they die.
So, Stella, this is the second time I've introduced you to an hour of mid-70s dated TV horror. What do you think this time?
I think because Contagion, realistic to our situation now to a degree, but, obviously wildly inflated. And I think it's even more so with Survivors. There's lots in it that is kind of recognisable to our situation now, but again, it's more inflated with the, 99.9% of people get it, cark it. But it was still, their fears. Should we go and get our son from school? Should we stay here? We'll probably be all right in the country. The city's a mess. All that kind of stuff is like, yep, recognisable. Yep. And I just found it very uncanny in a way, I suppose, because it's got a feeling very much in this 1970s TV drama where it's quite stilted and very 70s. And, the bit where she's making him a fry up for dinner, breakfast for dinner.
With the amazing line where he just says to her, "Are we going to eat?" And she goes, "Oh, sorry, I'll get..."
Well, he says, she's cooking and she puts his dinner down and he says, "Oh, you're not eating?" And she goes, "Oh, no, I'm just going to have some cheese." And then she just sits down with a massive whiskey. So, that's how she's staying so thin. Because, good wives don't eat. So that was funny. And then when she picks him up from the train station and she's like, "You must be exhausted." And he said, "I'm too angry to be exhausted."
Yes, that made me laugh.
So there was loads of quality 70s lines in it, which I really enjoyed.
Feels like my childhood, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's really enjoyable.
That's how people were.
And if I didn't if I didn't have more work to do, I would have carried on watching it and watched the next episode, because it was good. And I was also enjoying the lass who was just walking through the countryside, how she chose a blue furry coat with which to embark on her post-apocalyptic adventure.
Yeah.
But it was really good, and it was very that sort of understated spookiness, because you don't see anything. Got a few people thrashing around in a bed looking a bit sweaty.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really sort of felt nice and slow burny and uncanny.
Did it remind you of Barty's Party?
Definitely. I think it was just the actors, like the couple in the big house.
Yeah.
It's like the same middle class, same accent, same dynamic going on between those two. But I just one last point is I did make a mistake of reading the comments on YouTube. And lots of it was people going, who else is here because of COVID? Who else is here because of COVID? So all the comments on the top were from 2020.
All right.
And in the comments, there's quite a lot of anti-China racism. So I would take caution if you're going to look at the comments on it.
And we're speaking on the day when there's just been that shooting in Atlanta as well. So.
Has there?
Oh, I didn't know about that.
Oh, there's been anti-Chinese massacre in Atlanta.
Oh God!
Oh, no.
Come on, America.
Yeah. 8 dead, I think. Anyway, this has been a really cheery podcast.
Oh my God.
Anyway.
So yeah.
But yeah, I really liked it, and I'm going to watch more.
Cool.
It's another example of things that Contagion was a massively optimistic movie. It shows the best of humanity, and sadly, reality is, as we've seen today, as we've seen with Donald Trump going on about Kung Flu, which has led.
Yeah, that's in the comments on the YouTube.
Yeah. That's in reality, and even I don't know. I wonder if it's an American thing, as in even a Soderbergh movie, which is kind of realistic and a bit grim, is still very much on the optimism. And when you've got 1970s Terry Nation, it's like, what's going to happen if there's an apocalypse? Well, loads of angry people are going to get guns. And we go tribal, and there's hardly going to be any goodies, because you hardly meet any goodies as you go. You've watched it all, Dan. This is very much your area. But when I first got BritBox, I watched the first 10, I think, of Survivors. And it got a bit samey, to be honest.
It does.
But I will go back to it.
Not every episode is great, but every now and then there is an episode so powerfully dark that you just go, whoa. In fact, I suspect that you may have seen a really dark one and then stopped, because that's what happened to me the first time I tried to watch it. There's a really...
No, I'm not like you, Dan. If I see one like that, I go, ooh, I want to watch a bit.
Yeah, I want.
I don't get put off. I've spent COVID-19 watching Threads and The Mad Death.
Fair enough.
And Day of the Triffids again. So I've gone, That's how if I'm feeling bad, I put on Nick Drake.
I believe you. Okay, so did you see the episode where they have to put someone on trial?
Yeah, I think.
I think I saw that and then went, okay, enough for now, and I didn't watch the rest of the series for a few years.
Yeah, and Contagion has got hardly any. It's almost like it was written by people that were going, oh, this is going to happen at a time when, our gun laws have been improved, and like no one's got guns anymore. And there'll hardly ever be any civil unrest about anything. And,
although there are riots in Contagion.
Tiny amounts.
In the pharmacy.
But we're living in an age where if, just COVID-19 has caused the Capitol to be stormed. Obviously not just COVID-19.
No.
But we're living in an age where that has happened. And can you imagine if there was actually something bad happening, worse? They can't cope with COVID-19.
Mm.
There's a line in. It's weird as well, because it's so optimistic. Contagion. The line that kept coming up to me when I rewatched it was from that masterpiece, Die Hard. Is it 4.0? I think it's 4.0. Anyway, it's one of the really bad ones, anyway. And but there's a comment in it because it was made not long after Katrina.
I love 4.0.
And so the threat in it is basically, oh, this could really scramble. This would really mess up American society because it will cause disruption, and he's like, and somebody says, well, that won't be so bad, and he just goes, dude, it took them 3 days to get water to the Superdome. And I always think that's a really good line, because it did in a one little disaster in New Orleans. It took them 3 days to sort out who was sending water to the Superdome, which was full of people who didn't have water, because America doesn't work. And what have we seen in COVID-19?
Nightmare.
It doesn't work. I saw a brilliant thing on Twitter saying COVID-19 is, because it's exposing every society's failures and strengths and failures. And he said it's basically a black light shining into a room, and unfortunately, America is a cum-filled motel room, because there's just
sticky.
There's just grimness everywhere. There's grimness everywhere. But yeah, so Contagion was fun, but I think actually the more realistic, the more relentlessly grim is Survivors.
Well, it's certainly bleaker. I'd like to read you both something. A few years ago, I was supposed to be reviewing an episode of the audio series of Survivors, and I ended up not... I wrote this, but then cut it from the review, because basically I realised, wait a minute, you're right, this isn't a review, this is an essay about Survivors you're writing here. Because it's so powerful to me, and I just wanted to sum that up, so I'm just going to read a couple of paragraphs. I'm a sucker for post-apocalyptic fiction. There is such a vivid thrill in watching everything in the world that we've come to take for granted nightmarishly torn down, followed quickly by a combination of outright horror as life-threatening events become a daily occurrence for the few lucky enough to make it through the cataclysm, and a renewed appreciation for civilization as small human achievements suddenly achieve an epic significance. Often this thrill is augmented by the presence of a monstrous threat that either causes the apocalypse, rises up following it, or both. George A. Romero's flesh-eating zombies are perhaps the most obvious example. John Wyndham's Triffids possibly the most elegant. Terry Nation's Survivors does not take that approach, and is all the more fascinating for it. A few years ago I found myself in a deep, even for me, apocalyptic binge, imbibing multiple end-of-the-world narratives at once, watching The Walking Dead, reading F. Paul Wilson's Adversary Cycle, even working in a scream park where, as a miscellaneous ghoul, I got to wander through a zombie-infested wasteland, looking for tourists who wanted their picture taken with me. But, gripping though many of these frolics often were, none of them affected me as much as Survivors. In Survivors, a flu-like virus quickly and mercilessly wipes out 99.9% of the world's population. In Britain's home counties, a small band of naturally immune survivors, not one of whom knew any of the others prior to the pandemic, are confronted with what I found to be more chilling than any amount of zombies, Triffids, or Lovecraftian hellspawn. Simply a terrible, terrible quiet, and the other humans who had been changed by it.
I think therein lies the appeal of Survivors, but also it's sort of built in. It's the reason it gets a bit samey. It doesn't have zombies and it doesn't have Triffids.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely true. Yeah.
So it's but even Day of the Triffids gets a bit samey.
And it's quite short.
And I guess Walking Dead maybe gets a bit samey, but because it's exciting and they're zombies, we keep watching because it's whiz bangs. Although, as I was saying off mic, the latest Walking Dead, I've not finished watching it for the first time ever. I'm a sucker for, like you, Stella. I've literally watched anything that's Walking Dead. I haven't got bored of it yet, and I got bored of the latest episode. Wow. And I was like, oh my God, I might have had too many zombies. Or is it that they were the two most boring characters and they put them together for some reason? So oh God, I can't remember his name. The priest, Gabriel, and the guy with the spiky arm who's gay.
I know what you mean.
But do you know what I mean? they're the two most boring characters for my money.
Yeah, they're too nice.
They're dull, and yeah, it's a two-hander with them. So whose idea was that? Right. Do you think they're just not really popular with the rest of the crew? We're like, let's stick them off because fuck. We're going to be locked down. I'm not going to be doing a two-hander with him. No one wants to do a two-hander with either of them. They never get picked for sports. They can do it together. But so I found it intensely boring for the first time ever, and stopped watching. So see what you think. So
well, that's a shame. But I'm going to skip a few seasons of The Walking Dead. But I think Stella recommended I join in again at season 9, so I'll do that.
Season 9 pulled it back.
I'll keep my eye out for that.
I'd recommend Fear the Walking Dead over Walking Dead as well.
Well, that's another conversation. I've watched the first season of Fear the Walking Dead and I didn't love it. So I'd love to talk about that sometime. The first few episodes are great. But with Survivors, it does get samey very quickly. Like, the third episode is already quite dull, I think, or maybe the fourth. But throughout the whole season, throughout the whole 3 series they made of it, there are great and really dark episodes, even going straight up to the end. And then, this is the other major thing I wanted to mention. In 2014, Big Finish Productions started doing an audio version of it, where they basically picked up the narrative. They didn't just pick up the narrative of the original TV series. They reinvestigated that world where the pandemic had happened in 1975, and produced a series where all the actors are doing very effective mid-70s BBC type performances. It sounds appropriate.
We regret to announce that Parisian Airways Flight 305 to Charles de Gaulle has been cancelled.
Soon from Big Finish Productions. We assumed an incubation period of 5 to 7 days, followed by a fever lasting anything upwards of 24 hours. Beyond that, well, we're only starting to see that now.
Sorry, Mr. Redgrave. They're dead. This whole family. They're not breathing, not moving.
But I got better, didn't I? I got better, so they should have got better too! We made the world so much smaller. Thought we were so clever. Nobody ever thought what had happened if it suddenly got big again.
This is Dr. James Gillison. Can anybody hear me?
Well, when the plague came, I was in Holland. When I flew back, came down the coast, I saw enough to know that what we've experienced in Britain is likely to be the same across the world.
You know what the towns are like. There's disease.
I haven't spoken to anyone for days. I'm Jenny, by the way. Jenny Richards.
It's a matter of survival.
Survivors.
Ian, you listened to the first episode, didn't you? Which is it's the fall of civilization seen through the eyes of some other characters. It doesn't have any direct crossover with the first episode of the TV series, but they've put clear thought into the links between the two. Like, I think the audio episode 1 takes place a few days, I guess, before the TV version. And in the TV version, somebody does say, there was towards the end of the pandemic, they did announce a state of emergency, but it was already too late by then. And in the audio version, that happens.
Yeah, because in the TV series, obviously, we pick up as people come out of the city. Her husband comes back. Oh, it's all going a bit crazy back in the city. I'm just too angry to speak. Too angry to be tired.
Speak.
But yeah, so it's how it would be. The cities fall first, and then you're safe in the countryside comparatively
for a while.
But I was listening to the interviews as well that Big Finish did on the first episode, and they were saying, which I sort of picked up on anyway, that they sort of deliberately did locations that they didn't have the budget for in 1975. So it's at an airport,
Yeah.
With massive, what would be massive a cast of extras required, loads of, and actually probably quite grim for, you don't see many bodies in
the show, no.
But in this, you have a whole airport of dead people.
Yeah.
Nice.
Everyone there's got the plague, and 99.9% of them die. So presumably there are bodies, and they make reference to the fact that they've been moving bodies to the other rooms, and so it's kind of grim in that way. And then you have a massive, I guess, Walking Dead style traffic jam of people trying to get out of the city and that kind of thing, so it's deliberately a lot more of an urban experience, which is weird. I know we've talked about Walking Dead too much, but it's like that was the same decision that Fear the Walking Dead made. They went where we didn't show the apocalypse before, and it was kind of rural, and so what we did with Fear the Walking Dead was LA. It's like the opposite end of the spectrum. LA. Imagine being in LA when it kicks off, and so
riots. That's what happens.
Yeah.
I do want to mention the audio version of Survivors because I have listened to all of it, and I think it's really great. It takes all the really strong stuff from the TV series and fixes the problems with it, like the fact that the lead character in the first episode is Abby Grant, played by Caroline Seymour. And although when I watched it again, I did laugh because I think basically the first episode is built around 3 or 4 really chilling conversations, and I suddenly realised there's a lot of those conversations have the quality of mansplaining. So there's like the scene where the one scene in the city where the A&E doctor explains to Jenny Richards, played by Lucy Fleming, who is most famous now for being Ian Fleming's niece and controlling the rights to James Bond. You go, girl. She's done a good job of it. So basically, there's the scene where that doctor, who's played by a completely forgotten actor called Callum Mill, and I just look at it, and he's not really. He's slightly non-Caucasian. The actor was Indian, and I just remember being so grateful that there's a sort of a non-white face in this, and he's in a non-stereotypical role, and he has this great speech where he says, "Jenny, just get out of the city." And she says, "Why?" And he says, "Because if people continue to die at this rate, soon we won't be able to bury our own dead."
Yeah.
And there's a number of just lines like that in the episode, which are just so thoroughly chilling.
Yeah.
Also, at the time, that was very 70s thing anyway, because of strikes, because of power cuts. So, not the dead not being buried, they started building up in the 70s.
Right.
The bins rubbish was all over the streets because the bin men didn't come, and then in graveyards they had a backlog because of strikes and general 4-day week and that sort of thing. So all that's in the mix at the time that Terry Nation was writing.
Yeah.
Eco Apocalypse and they'd already seen society start to fray in the 70s. Oil, oil crisis.
Yeah, oil crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. That is all in there. What I was going to say is that, well, the reason that I think that the episode gets away with so much mansplaining is that because the pandemic kills so many people, all the explanatory men then die, and we're left with these fantastic female characters who have to pick up the pieces. And I think Abby Grant, played by Caroline Seymour, who at the end of the episode does the amazing, very symbolic 70s thing of cutting her long hair off. So it's like, I am denuding myself of some of my femininity. I'm going to take charge at this point, and she's just
ready for action.
Great. And that character sadly disappears from the TV series after the first series, possibly because basically the producer didn't like the actress, Caroline Seymour, who was apparently the most highly paid actress on British TV at the time. I think she was worth every penny, but the producer disagreed. She sodded off to America and has had a much more successful career in America, usually playing villains. Did either of you watch Quantum Leap?
Only occasionally.
Nope.
Okay, the first time I remember, she was really memorable, and the first time I saw her was she was playing a villain in Quantum Leap. You know, do you remember how Sam, the Leaper, had like the character played by Dean Stockwell, who was like his genie-like advisor who would turn up. There was an episode which was literally called The Evil Leaper, where there was another Leaper who was evil, and Carolyn Seymour was her equivalent of Dean Stockwell. And she'd basically just appear and say snooty, barbed one-liners in a striking English accent. And I immediately just thought, she's cool. And then discovered that this is where she'd come from. Anyway, one of the things that's great about the series is that... what's great about the audio version is that it takes away the kind of the potential for dull episodes. Partly because the series on audio are much shorter. There's 9 series and they're 4 episodes long each. But there's a lot more villains in the audio series. There's a lot more dark stuff. They come across cannibals and things like this. But the major thing is that the main characters in the audio do run into the characters from the TV version. And Big Finish did manage to get Abby Grant, Carolyn Seymour, back. So they brought her back into it. She's still fantastic. She's absolutely amazing, in fact.
And Lucy Fleming's in it as well.
Yes, and also the other main character who's not in the first episode, Greg, played by Ian McCulloch. They're all back in it, and all their character arcs are completed. Basically, Big Finish brought it to a definitive conclusion. The last series they released was in 2019. And I hear that it never sold very well, possibly because Survivors doesn't have a huge fan base. I'm just here to recommend it massively to everybody who might be interested, because it's so good, and all those episodes are still on sale at the Big Finish website. I think it's the best thing they've ever done. And also, there's one episode, Ian, written by Louise Jameson.
Oh, wow.
She's a regular in it. Ian's worked with Louise.
I never knew she was from Survivors.
And she wrote at least one episode, and you know, she is always keen to explore kind of feminist issues, and she writes an episode where they find a female-only colony of survivors, and there's...
Which takes us into Tenko territory, in a weird way.
Well, she's writing what she knows, so, you know.
It's a female colony in The Walking Dead as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Oceanside.
Oh, I don't think that's one I've seen. That must be later on. So, I don't know who did it first, Stella, I have to say.
I was going to ask before we go, but I was just going to ask because I've watched the 2008 remake on BBC, which got cancelled after season 2, and I was a bit I could have watched one more season, but I suppose I'm not that bothered, and that's probably why it's been cancelled. But it was all right, with Julie Graham and Max Beasley and Patterson Joseph and Roger Lloyd Pack as an evil trucker. But in that, they start hinting that they know where the plague came from. And I just wondered, you know, it was an evil plot.
Right.
I wondered, it's probably a spoiler to say, yes, if this is it. But does that start coming into the original Terry Nation vision?
No, it never does.
No, it does. So he takes the sort of Walking Dead approach of, if we explain this, then that takes away the horror. No, life's not that neat.
And because you mentioned the anti-China sentiment, Stella, I should explain. Yeah, the opening titles kind of suggest that the virus probably came from a laboratory with a Chinese man in it. Let's say there's no details. You just see the guy. But apart from that title sequence, you never hear about it. There's never any details. Whether whether that was really where it came from, we don't know.
So in a way, that's a better decision on Terry Nation's part, because as soon as you start going, it was an evil plot by some people who wanted to take over the world by depopulating it, that suddenly doesn't feel very compelling, and you also know they're going to find a cure, aren't they?
Yeah.
Which is why they cleverly, I mean, we're talking about Walking Dead again, but they really cleverly did that with Eugene in Walking Dead.
Oh, I loved that whole arc.
Which is just brilliant, because I'm there going, really?
Is that really going to save the world? And then
that sequence of The Walking Dead is fantastic, and he's a great character. Okay,
season 4 is my favourite season.
It is really good. Yeah. So
yeah, it's a cracker.
awesome.
It's a cracker.
Well, sadly, that's all the time we have on this episode of the podcast to talk about Survivors. But if you're interested, my essay reviewing the 9th series of the Survivors audio drama and its relationship to the original TV series will soon be published on our blog, and there'll be a link in our show notes. Now, though, it's time for our weekly phone call from Howard and the Bag of Death. Okay, folks, it is time once again for the Bag of Death, the bag which contains every English language horror film that I, T.D. Velasquez, and my friend and co-conspirator Howard Whittock have seen in our lives. Which will we discuss now? Howard, hello, sir.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very, very well, as I always am at this time. How are you?
I'm extremely well. Looking forward to this.
Excellent. Well, here is the Bag of Death. I have it in my very hands. I'm giving it a bit of a shake, and I'm rummaging within, and we shall see what comes out. It's interesting that the last 3 recordings we've done for this, I think I can let the listener know we don't do these one at a time. We do them in blocks of about 4.
Yeah.
And every other film we've talked about today has been a Hammer film. So,
yes.
What will the 4th be?
It's fine by me. I love Hammer films, so.
And so do I. So I have something in my hand, and it is Murder by Decree.
Right. That's an interesting one.
That's an interesting choice, and I'm going to be completely open with the listeners on this. I have only just seen this film for the first time a couple of days ago, and I thought, right, that's got to go in the Bag of Death. So, Murder by Decree was a 1978 British-Canadian co-production, and it's a Sherlock Holmes film whose conceit is it's pitting the great fictional detective against the infamous and forever unidentified Victorian real murderer, Jack the Ripper. And it's got the late great, at the time of recording, he's recently passed away, Christopher Plummer as Sherlock Holmes, and also the late great James Mason as Dr. Watson. Whenever I see James Mason, Howard, I think of you. I can't imagine why.
I just don't understand it. Why would you possibly do that? I love James Mason. He's one of my favourite actors. My memory of this is a bit hazy because it's a long time since I've seen it, but I think it's a really interesting film. I think one of the reasons I remember it is because it was on at Christmas. And when I was young, the films that were on at Christmas were always special because they always like the big films. And even now, when I watch things like Murder on the Orient Express or The Poseidon Adventure or Where Eagles Dare, I think, well, these were the films on at Christmas, usually on Boxing Day. These were the big films. They were so exciting because they were on at Christmas. And I think, and even something like Breakheart Pass, which is a Charles Bronson film, I love that film. I think it's a good film, but I think it's because it was on at Christmas and it made it more exciting. And this film, I think, was on at Christmas as well. And so I remember it. And I remember seeing the book as well in Smith's and looking at the back cover and seeing all the people in it.
So is that like the novelisation of the film?
As they say.
Or was it the book that the film was based on? Because it was actually, the script is original, but it was derived from a book that was written about theories of who Jack the Ripper was, called The Ripper File.
Well, it's the old idea that's been done several times that the Ripper murders were not committed by Prince Edward, the son of Queen Victoria, who later became Edward VII, but he was kind of involved in them, which has been done. I mean, wasn't there a big mini-series in the 1980s with Michael Caine called Jack the Ripper, which had the same idea that it was the Queen's physician or something that was going around doing all this?
Yes, and also Alan Moore's graphic novel From Hell, which was later made into a movie with Johnny Depp, I think was also based on the same theories.
It's a famous theory of the time. I don't know. I don't know. We'll never know who Jack the Ripper was. So it's a really good film. I mean, you know, when I saw this book, I saw the back cover and all the people who are in it, because it's got this great cast of actors like David Hemmings is in it, and Genevieve Bujold, wonderful French actress, is in it, and Frank Finlay and people like that, and Donald Sutherland. So it was like a big production at the time. And the man who made this, Bob Clark, this really classy, elegant film, went on to make Porky's.
Yes.
Which is the sort of old crap you've ever seen in your life.
Although he also directed Black Christmas, which is our friend Spider Dan's favourite slasher movie, I think.
No kidding.
Yes. And he also went on to do a movie which I've never seen, and it doesn't have cultural impact in Britain, I think, but in America it's one of the kind of key Christmas movies, the 1984 Canadian film just called A Christmas Story.
With the great Darren McGavin.
Oh, is he in that? I didn't know. Okay.
Yeah, when he died, it was one of the things, it was Kolchak was mentioned, and this film, what's it called, A Christmas Story?
A Christmas Story, yeah.
It mentioned that as well, so I think it's a much bigger film in America than it is here. But anyway, Bob Clark directed this film, and it's very classy and it's very elegant, and it's obviously an expensive film. Getting people like John Gielgud in to sort of cameos and stuff.
It's got a very distinguished cast.
Very distinguished cast. It's a very kind of big production, but I think the best thing about it, because I don't know about that theory of who Jack the Ripper is, this film posits that idea that there's a royal connection. But I think the great thing about this film is the relationship between Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson.
Yes, I think that's it works beautifully well, and those two actors who are probably the starriest pair of actors ever. The most heavyweight movie stars ever to play those characters, I think, as a pair. It really works beautifully. But why exactly do you like it, Howard?
Well, I think just because they're two great actors. And I remember that scene where Dr. Watson, played James Mason, is eating his dinner, isn't he? And there's a pea.
Yes.
And he picked the pea up on the fork. He keeps rolling around and he can't pick it up. And then Sherlock Holmes comes along and he gets the fork and he squashes the pea and says, "There you are, you can eat it now." And Dr. Watson says something like, "You can't do that, Holmes. It's pea. You can't squash a feller's pea." And that would be as kind of that, and that kind of humour. That's what really makes this film work. Sherlock Holmes can be, he's been played so many times by so many different actors, and we all have an image of what Sherlock Holmes should be. And this is kind of like making him a little bit less acerbic, a little bit warmer, and a little bit more sympathetic, and certainly Dr. Watson as well. And you can tell they're friends.
Yeah.
I don't know whether Plum and James Mason were friends in real life, but it's a very kind of warm friendship between them. Because in some Sherlock Holmes films, perhaps in the Basil Rathbone ones, you think, well, why does Sherlock Holmes hang around with this idiot? Much as I love Nigel Bruce, they said, well, why? He just gets in the way. And isn't. But in this film, you can quite understand why. They are friends, and they are sort of like, they have this kind of relationship, and it's fair.
And even though James Mason is on the old side for Watson, he comes across not just as an affable character and also a kind of comic foil sometimes, but he is quite able to handle himself. He goes into dangerous situations. He's practical and sensible, and he cares about people, but he has his limits as well. When Holmes is inspecting the bodies of the Ripper's mutilated victims, Watson, despite his wartime experience and his medical background, he kind of stands away because it's so hideous he doesn't want to see. And the movie's kind of full of things like that which indicate really dreadful happenings without exploiting them, without putting them kind of nakedly on the screen. And I think that's impressive.
It's a while since I've seen it, so I can't remember everything, but I do remember sort of like Holmes chasing the two bad guys. And there's a scene where, and then there's a very long scene at the end where he's talking to John Gielgud and explaining everything. So I do remember I liked it when I watched it, and I thought it's just a very stylish, classy Sherlock Holmes films. And even when I saw it years ago, I'd seen so much Sherlock Holmes before that.
Yeah.
The same old. But this had a slightly different approach, and it was just quite stylish, I thought, and quite.
No, it is. It looks beautiful. There's a lot of use of, I think, combination of models and matte paintings to create the London skyline, and it's really great looking. The photography is fantastic. It's beautifully atmospheric. It's got a certain claim, I think, because of the quality of the cast, and also the fact that it's so well made and it has the big budget and the literate script. It's one of the best Sherlock Holmes films, I think. Although it's ironic that it's one of the ones that is in no way based on any of Conan Doyle's stories.
No.
And in fact, it's not even the first Sherlock Holmes film to feature Jack the Ripper, because that was 1965's A Study in Terror, which is a quite different film, even though it's based on the same idea, and even though both movies have Frank Finlay as Inspector Lestrade in them, which is weird.
He's a very good actor, though.
Yes, he's perfect for that character. It's just odd that he plays it in two different movies with the same plot. Instead of in two different Sherlock Holmes films telling other stories.
Because Sherlock Holmes had been done a lot in the 70s. We had The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, which is great.
Yeah.
Stephen.
Yeah.
And then we had The 7% Solution, which is not great.
I've never seen it.
No, I've seen some of it, and it's not... I think I turned it over because I didn't like it very much. Nicole Williamson as Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah. And then there's also The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes' Smarter Brother, starring Gene Wilder. I think that fits into that trend.
I don't think that's very funny. But, it's the Hound of the Baskervilles, the Peter Cook Hound of the Baskervilles as well, which is...
well, yeah. So, but then we're moving away. But I mean, well, the thing is, the other movies, even the Gene Wilder one, have a kind of strain of legitimacy to them. I mean, the Gene Wilder one actually has... it has Thorley Walters and what's his name as Douglas Wilmer as Holmes and Watson. Playing kind of straight versions of those characters, both of whom played those roles in other places, in other productions. In fact, there is a kind of lost 1976 TV version of the story Silver Blaze, in which Thorley Walters played Watson with Christopher Plummer as Holmes. So,
yes, I have about that, yeah.
So Murder by Decree is not Plummer's first Holmes. It sadly was his last one. But I think it's such a substantial film that I didn't leave it thinking, oh, I wish Plummer and Mason had made loads more Holmes films. It seems, even though they're great, it just seems to do everything that you need it to do. Oh, and I think it should be mentioned, I don't know if this is true because it was told to me by our friend Ross, and I don't know where he got his information from because it wasn't in any of the books I read or on Wikipedia or places like that. But he told me that the scene where Watson's trying to spear a pea, that scene was actually written by James Mason.
Oh, wow. I wouldn't be surprised.
It's a really lovely bit of character.
I mean, I remember that kind of most of all. I think it's just one of the kind of... It's funny, but it's sort of telling about their relationship and everything, and about them. And he's such a great actor. And he's great. I've read his autobiography, and he's a very good writer as well, so I wouldn't be surprised if he'd written that. It's not a film that's particularly well remembered as much as some of the others.
No.
But I think it's maybe it is because it's done before. It's Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper, which has been done. So, but I think it's the best version of Sherlock Holmes versus Jack the Ripper.
It's a long time since I saw Study in Terror, but on one viewing, Murder by Decree kind of made more of an impression on me. It seemed more successful. The only thing about Murder by Decree which I thought didn't really work very well is the subplot about the clairvoyant character played by Donald Sutherland.
Yes, I did think that was a bit weird.
Yeah, he just doesn't have a lot to contribute.
No.
Although he looks amazing with his kind of pallid, drug-addled kind of complexion and his stunningly ornate beard and moustache. It might be the best that Donald Pleasance was going to say. Donald Sutherland has ever looked. Not that he looks healthy, but it's an amazing visage.
Yes, I think it's just he's there just to get another star name into it, really. To get Donald Sutherland into the film, kind of thing. because he'd be a big name then. So
I think it's interesting as well. The film's kind of status as a Canadian-British co-production leads to a kind of lovely open accent policy in the cast. Nobody, I mean, Christopher Plummer is sort of doing a British accent, but no more than he normally did. I mean, he was Canadian, and he always sounded a little bit gentrified. Mason sounds English. Sutherland sounds Canadian, which he is. Genevieve Bujold sounds French Canadian, which she is. I think a couple of the kind of smaller characters, like there's a key character in it who's a prostitute called Mary Kelly, played by an actress, Susan Clark. I think she was Canadian, and she does do a Cockney.
Susan Clark is a Colombo murderer.
Is she really? In a good one?
In one of the early ones, yeah.
Right. Oh, wow. Oh, I must see that.
Yeah.
Well, so I assume she sounded Canadian, but she does do a Cockney accent in the film. But I think she's the only one who does that.
Good actress, actually.
Right. Well, yeah, definitely. So.
Bigger than she was.
Right. Oh, fantastic. So I think we're both very fond of Murder by Decree.
I'd like to see it again, because I'd like again, now that Christopher Plummer's just died, and of course it's all about the Sound of Music, which is great. You know, I do like the Sound of Music a lot, and I think he's great in that.
I've never watched it properly, I have to admit.
No, I do. I mean, people say it's sentimental, whatever, but it is what it is, and it's enjoyable, and the songs are great too. But that's what he's remembered for. And some of these other films that he did kind of tend to get a bit forgotten, perhaps. And nobody really mentioned this one. Nobody mentioned that he played Sherlock Holmes. He looks like Sherlock Holmes. You know, he's perfect for the part. And it's a very good film, and I'd like to see it again. And obviously a lot of money was spent on it, and it must have been a big film at the time. How successful it was, I don't know, but you know, it's a big.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good film.
And it makes me want to watch more Bob Clark films, but not Porky's.
No, not Porky's. Or Porky's 2. Or Porky's Revenge.
I don't know that Clark had anything to do with the sequels. He may have done.
But he did. Somebody put those things together.
Somebody should be held responsible, but... yeah. Okay, so... But no, I think pretty great stuff. And also it's got a good score by Paul Zazar, who worked on another Canadian horror film that doesn't get talked about, but I think is rather good. Visiting Hours, starring William Shatner and Lee Grant, of course. Yeah. Have you seen that one?
No.
Right, and it's very good. Yeah, it's worth checking out. And Michael Ironside. So. All right, so that's Murder by Decree. That's a wonderful film to pull out of the bag of death this week. Thank you very much for that, Howard.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it was good.
We shall reconvene next time. It's time to withdraw a random film from the bag of death. In the meantime, my friend, take care.
And you. Stay safe.
Thank you, my friend. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, it's about time we wrapped up this episode. It's been really fun to talk about, as always.
Yes.
Have you guys got recommendations you want to share for this week?
I have. It's entirely unrelated. Wildly unrelated.
Go for it.
But in my general need to watch all things grim, there's a 2-part documentary by Christopher Spencer called Waco, Madman or Messiah. And it was done in 2018.
I've said at the time he's a madman.
And it's got some interesting footage from it, and then they also sort of add in some, dramatized bits to show what was kind of going on behind the scenes. And yeah, if you remember the story, you remember how disturbing it was. And yeah, it's really good. It's really well done. It's quite sympathetic to the people that were part of the Branch Davidians. And they go back to the original, go back to the place, go back to Mount Carmel where it happened, and yeah, it's a good one.
Does it go to Manchester?
Balanced. To Manchester, where that guy's from?
Yeah. Well, because
it doesn't go to Manchester, but it does interview
because as a thing, if you liked Waco, End of Days on BBC Sounds, and I've just checked it, it's still available, is amazing. And it's a podcast BBC did. I think BBC Radio 5 did it. But it sort of, with Waco coming down the track, it basically goes right back to the beginning, and so much of it was to do with a little weird commune in Manchester.
Yeah,
England.
yeah. Well, he's interviewed in this.
But it's a really good podcast. I'd recommend to.
Yeah, I'll listen to that.
It's called End of Days on BBC Sounds, and it's 8 episodes that take you all the way up to. It's
that day
of everybody all the way up to that day.
Yeah.
But just the really early days of when he
I'll
was
listen to that.
Just a weird guy, and
Grim,
being a
grimmer
bit
the better.
yeah. It's a very grim subject.
Yes.
Yeah,
anyway, and then I bought a big book on Waco like 2 days afterwards. It says one of the survivors. It's his book, and it's 3 inches thick, and it's like, that's my summer read.
It's also so linked. It's along with Timothy McVeigh and general fucked upness.
He was there. He wasn't in. Yeah, he was there, and he was hanging out outside.
Yeah. There's a really good podcast about McVeigh actually, on BBC Sounds as well, which was chilling to watch, and they even did a new episode because stuff that they talked about just 6 months before. Some of those people were in the Senate building during the storming of the Senate.
Oh God!
And it all stems from the Tea Party and the 3%ers,
yeah,
and the Turner Diaries. If you know what the Turner Diaries are.
I do know what the Turner Diaries are.
Like a alternative reality that it's basically like dystopian fiction, but for people that are right-wing fuckheads.
Yeah.
And it's
survivalists.
It's a survivalist race war, wet dream.
It's very disturbing.
Timothy McVeigh murdered 190 people because of it, and loads of people see Timothy McVeigh as a hero and a martyr.
It's very problematic.
And in 2016, they got their first president that they approved of.
Right.
That is America.
Yeah, dear.
So. Talking of depressing dystopia.
On that note,
it's all linked.
It's all linked.
Bunch of great linked recommendations. Ian, did you have any other recommendation you wanted to make, or does that cover it?
Well, I was just going to say nothing to do with the horror genre, but I'm really enjoying Bryan Cranston's latest on Sky Atlantic Now TV, which is called Your Honor, and it's very good, but it's not horror in any way whatsoever. Although it's actually really quite grim with some of the violence that's in it. So, Gorehounds.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, my recommendation is going to be straightforward. I don't need to give any details. I'm just going to say there's the audio series of Survivors, and the reason I can recommend that is because the first episode is available to listen for free on the Big Finish website, so I'll put links into that. So,
cool.
Even if you only hear the first episode, you hear the end of the world. So,
first one's for free.
And I'd just like to make a related recommendation to British Invaders, the podcast about British science fiction television. The hosts, Brian Doob from Canada and Eamon Clark from England, they talk about more or less every British cult science fiction type series they can think of, 1 or 2 episodes at a time, and they have 2 episodes about Survivors, and then they have another 2 episodes about the Big Finish audio version of Survivors, and they managed to talk in an intriguing and interesting way about those things without spoiling too much of it. And I can say that because I listened to their shows about Survivors before I'd seen the whole series or heard the whole series. So if you're intrigued by what we've said on this podcast today, but you're still not sure if you want to check out the series or invest your time in it, then I'd recommend those episodes of the British Invaders podcast, and the links will be in the show notes. That's the end of this episode, folks. We're going to be back next week, and it's going to be our final episode this series. We're going to have a few months off we will be back in future, but we thought we'd have a last episode where Kirsty, Stella, Ian and I will talk about all the things we didn't have time to talk about in the previous episodes. So thanks very much for listening this week.
We'll be back when we lock down again.
That's the spirit.
Hopefully it won't take that to make us come back, but you never know. At least we know we'll have something to do if we do lock down again.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Every cloud has a silver lining.
Yes, we are the silver lining of the pandemic. Only us.
One day I might meet Stella and Kirsty in real life.
Wow, imagine
I've
that.
never actually, it's weird. You just think,
See you in 3 dimensions.
How many people do I know that I haven't ever met before?
Count the students for me.
Well,
a few hundred students.
Well, yeah, same here. Yeah.
Loads of them.
Yeah.
God, weird.
Do they even exist?
Oh gosh, a whole different kind of
Anyway,
psychological horror.
Let's
All
go.
Right. Thank you so much, Stella. Thank you so much.
It's glitching. She's become self-aware. Rewind.
And on that note, see you next week, folks. Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to And Now the Podcast Starts. Produced and released by Ambidextrous Solutions Limited. Presented by T.D. Velasquez, Stella Gaynor, Ian Winterton, and Howard Whittaker. Special thanks to Greg Hume for our original theme music, and to Brian Gorman for our original artwork. All dialogue and music clips from films, TV shows, and trailers are used for the purposes of criticism, in the spirit of fair dealing as defined in UK law, and fair use as defined in US law. No copyright infringement is intended. Please visit our home on the web, www.andnowpodcast.com, for more content and contact details. Or visit our Facebook pages at AndNowPod or at Lee Cushing Pod. Follow us on Twitter at AndNowPodcast or at Lee Cushing Podcast. If you'd like to donate to us, please visit patreon.com/AndNowPodcast. And now the podcast stops.